Hi, my name's Margot Nack. I'm a senior product manager at Adobe. I work in our video and audio business unit, and my specific area of focus is cloud workflows in video post-production. So I'm going to talk about what we have seen over the last 12 or so months, which in a nutshell means that the future is now. And I'm going to talk specifically about remote video editing workflows and what we're hearing and seeing in the industry and hearing and seeing from our customers that we work with every day. So first, I will start by doing a quick recap on 2020, which is, I would give this 0 stars, actually would not recommend 2020. Don't want to go back there. Hopefully we're all coming out of this long tunnel. We kind of all thought in our industry, like, oh, people aren't really ready for cloud workflows. No one's really comfortable moving everything into a cloud environment. There are issues and it's too hard. And it's not going to happen for another few years. Well, guess what? It all happened in 2020. And people had to start figuring out how to continue producing video content without being in an office. And so 2020 was a really interesting year as far as the video industry was concerned. So it proved to us that the only constant is change, and that the forecast is cloudy, and it's going to remain cloudy, we think, forever. We've seen really massive changes in the way that post-production work is getting done. And although some of them might be kind of transient, and ultimately, we do think a lot of people will go back to working in a co-located environment. A lot of the changes that we are seeing that have either already happened or are underway now, we think a lot of these are permanent, and I'll get into some detail on that later in my talk. We'll talk about 2020's impact on software tools and services, right? How do you get your work done when you're not in the same room? How do you get the software that you need? How do you work together with other people? And what does that mean for how your content is delivered and how you get what you need on your desktop? Another big issue that we've seen come up, and I'm sure this is probably familiar to a lot of you, is how do you replicate that in-person interaction that we all used to have when we were in the same building or the same room or down the hall from each other, or maybe we shared an editing bay? That is certainly something that has largely gone away. And we are actively exploring all kinds of alternatives for how to replicate that in remote environments. And then certainly last but not least, how do we stay productive as teams while we're working remotely and you can't actually see someone, you can't look over their shoulder and see what they're working on or offer a comment. You can't just airdrop someone a file or point them to a shared storage location. How do you stay productive as a team? And how do you reduce the toil that kind of is necessarily an accompaniment to working remotely? There's a lot more administration and organization that you need to be worried about when you are not co-located. So we believe that there is all kinds of upside in cloud workflows to help address all of these issues. And I'm really excited to talk about what we think that future looks like. So I'm on Zoom right now, and I'm sure everyone in the audience has probably been on more Zoom meetings in the last 12 months than you ever thought you would be in your entire life. And so this is one of those things that has proven to us how much work you can get done remotely. And the nice thing is that at least we have some basic technology that now meets us where we are and helps us get our work done. So when it comes to post-production, what we're seeing is that not just for post-production, but for production itself, working from home is now the status quo, right? So starting in the spring of 2020, we saw all kinds of content and all kinds of productions move to a home environment. Seth Meyers started broadcasting from home. Saturday Night Live went completely remotely with people filming in their own apartments and the post-production happening in other people's apartments. We saw news anchor people setting up home studios. We saw weathermen delivering green screen weather reports from their garages. We saw Peloton instructors teaching from home. All of that content was being produced remotely as well. So hopefully, even once we all emerge from shutdown, we will retain those parts of the workflow that have made us more efficient, and have really enabled people to not need to be in the same place at the same time. So COVID has really been a forcing function for us. And what we've seen is a really interesting move in a number of ways towards enabling remote workflows. And so this slide, I know it's a little confusing, and that's on purpose. It's because there are a lot of ways to solve these problems. Whether you're a student, a freelance editor, whether you're part of a studio or post-production house, or you're working for a large enterprise, your work environment has changed. You might still be in the same city as the rest of your team, but you can't be in the same room. You can't even be in the same building. You might be scattered across multiple continents and time zones. You may not be connected to shared storage anymore. And we've all had to get really creative about how to continue producing content. What we're seeing is that manifests through a seemingly infinite combination of tools and services, for sharing media, for reviewing and commenting, for editing, and for collaborating. And so I've thrown up some of the examples, and this is just a really small selection. There is Google Drive, there's WeTransfer, there's email, there's FaceTime, there's Zoom, there's Slack, there's text messaging. There are all the creative apps that teams need to use to actually produce content. There are options for shipping hard drives through the mail, which is still a super common, shockingly, super common workflow. And then you'll see I've shown a couple of editors who've got their workstations set up at home. So people are working from their kitchen counters, people are working from their living rooms or a closet in their studio apartment. And so there are a million clever ways that people have figured out how to solve these remote workflow issues. We think that there's still a ton of potential to make this easier and smoother, and make it less of a bumpy road, and actually integrate remote workflows in such a way that they feel really natural, they feel really frictionless, and it's something that you could take advantage of if and when you need to. As I mentioned before, the good thing is that technology has started to meet us where we need it to be. Broadband availability and broadband speeds are way up compared to 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So it's easier to get our work done remotely because we have more bandwidth available, generally speaking. And now is really the time for us to invent new ways of working that are better than what we had before. And that can result in things like being able to work regardless of where we are, regardless of what hardware is sitting on our desk, regardless of the size of our team or the lack of team, or the amount of media that we need to share. So what's exciting, I think, and what we're hearing from a lot of our customers kind of across M&E is that technology has really started to converge where we need it to be. And it's easier for us to get our work done when we have no choice, and we have to make it work. So I'm going to touch on a few areas here that are really kind of the main pillars of where we see the future of post-production happening. I mentioned connectivity already. High-speed access is becoming more and more ubiquitous and lower in cost, which is great. We are seeing a real shift in hardware. So as both Mac and Windows transition to ARM, what we'll be seeing is convergence between mobile and desktop clients. We'll be seeing lighter weight laptops and desktop computers. They'll be lower cost as well as being lighter weight. They'll stay super performant. We're already doing testing on Apple's M1 hardware. And what we're seeing is the performance is blazingly fast. And that's really good news because it's going to cost people a lot less to get really performant hardware than it does today. We're seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning evolve really rapidly. And what we're seeing is that they've already started to take their place in workflows today. We think the possibilities are endless when it comes to content intelligence. And content intelligence is something that can help you navigate and work with all of your media across your projects without having to do a lot of the manual organization and enrichment that you do today. So we feel like the upside is really around automation and enriching content with all the metadata that's going to prove useful to you and your team and your workflow. Lastly, we're seeing the rise of web applications as legitimate creative editing tools. So they can be delivered through a browser. They can be delivered through a mobile interface. They are powered through web GPU. And you can do real work, like real heavy lifting on lightweight connected devices. So all of this is to say that you can do legitimate, high production value, complex work, and soon you'll be relying less and less on your hardware that's sitting on your desktop. What's going to be important is that you can connect to the media itself. The content is really crucial, and your ability to connect to it is really important. But the hardware that you're working with is going to become less important as more and more features and workflows move to the cloud. So we see the cloud really becoming the platform for post-production, ubiquitous media access. Let me get to my assets wherever I am and wherever they are, and let me do that in a secure way. Let me share and collaborate not only with my creative peers, but also with my stakeholders. So if I'm a craft editor, I probably have an assistant editor. I might have a VFX person. I might have an audio mixer. I need to collaborate with my creative team, and they are going to need access to all of the media that I have as well. But I also want to collaborate with my stakeholders. So my professors, my creative directors, my art directors, my producers, they need to review, approve, comment on all of the content we're producing before it hits the airwaves, so to speak. Media management, I touched on this a little bit. The more useful metadata that we can attach to your content, the more efficiently you can work with it. You'll know more about it. It will be easier to find. We can tell you where that media has been used in prior projects, and which media you already have rights approved for or not. So media management is a big one. Content intelligence and automation. Again, I'll get into kind of an illustration of this in a few minutes, but we really feel like the opportunity here with AI and ML is making working with content a lot easier and letting computers do what they're really good at, which is analyzing all of your assets, understanding what's in those assets and why it might be important to you, and then surfacing that for you in a really natural, organic way that lets you work with it and find what you need when you need it. And then ultimately, right, content doesn't matter unless it's published somewhere. We're already seeing some really interesting workflows happening around automated publishing and cloud-to-cloud publishing. We're also seeing that the sheer volume of content that people are responsible for getting out in the world continues to increase exponentially, and it's already gotten beyond human scale. So you don't just release one video to Facebook in the English language. You are releasing many versions of that content in many different aspect ratios, potentially many different languages, some with subtitles across many different channels. And so that quickly gets out of control for one person or even a handful of people to manage. And that's where we really feel like content intelligence and automation can flow into those publishing workflows as well. And success here really is going to enable our products to be more agile and meet your needs, but also make you as customers more productive. So the opportunity is really boundless, and we think the future is really exciting. To illustrate that, kind of some of the concepts I've been talking about, what we're talking about here is really putting media in the center. So all of the footage that you need to create your content is going to sit at the center. Whereas before, companies like Adobe, we make creative tools. And so we liked to think that really the tools sat at the center, right? You can't create content without Premiere Pro or without Photoshop or After Effects or Illustrator. That is still true to a certain degree, but really the media moves to the center. And the more we can layer value on top of that media for you, the more apt you're going to be to create the content that you need. And with media sitting in the cloud, in the middle of workflows, we can meet you where you want to be. So if you're a creative pro and you want a lot of creative control and a lot of precision, you can still use your desktop app like After Effects or Premiere Pro. We obviously support interop between our own creative apps, but you can tap into that shared media as a single source of truth. For less sophisticated users who may produce video and audio content as part of their daily job, but they wouldn't call themselves a professional, we can meet those users where they are as well. That may be simple task-based tools that show up in a web browser. So for instance, a user might log in, all they need to do is exchange a background or drop in some different music or trim a clip. Those are things that you can do without having to crack open Premiere Pro. And frankly, you shouldn't have to open a big heavyweight NLE for something that simple. We can offer templates and suggestions, things like motion graphics templates, titles, caption styles, for these quick tasks. And we can really enable users to not have to know a lot about how to do what they want to do, but still end up with really high quality, high value content. And then finally, over in sort of that purple slice of the pie are this group of folks that we call creators. So they're not yet creative pros. They are interested in making really great looking content. They may be fairly advanced hobbyists. They may be brand new. So they may want a web-based tool. They may want a mobile tool. We're pretty sure that they're going to need some of that creative muse power as well. So again, being able to funnel in artificial intelligence infused suggestions to help them create their content, we think is going to be really crucial. And it's going to take away those barriers to entry. I think people tend to still be fairly intimidated about the amount of work it takes to make a really, really good looking video. And we aim to make that a lot more approachable. And we also aim to help you along your journey. There will be a time when users bump up against the limits of something like a web-based tool and want to make the leap into a professional NLE. And we can meet them again wherever they are in that kind of lifespan of making content. And then I'll just touch briefly on this. So in addition to putting media at the center and providing a lot of intelligence around that media, we think that by having media in the center, we can then connect people to it. So you've got your creative peers who are connecting to that media. You've got those stakeholders that I mentioned before who can also participate by contributing or just simply doing review and comment. And again, doing that through a browser interface instead of doing that through a creative tool or some completely foreign tool like FaceTime or text messaging or a spreadsheet. We've heard it all. And we think that there's a lot of upside to building in sort of organic, natural feeling review and comment workflows for stakeholders. Something that we've also seen kind of rapidly advance this year is interest in camera to cloud workflows. And we at Adobe are working with a handful of camera vendors who are working on making their content available, get rid of those, making their content available directly to the cloud from the camera that's shooting it. And so we're doing some interesting research here to understand how quickly we can get content directly into the cloud without any intermediary, no hard drives, no transfer, nothing. And we think that there are some really interesting possibilities there. So hang on, I've lost my cursor here. There we go. There we go. So what we're seeing too, and this reflects some real clients that we have today, what we're seeing is teams that are distributed all over the world. And what this means is that small teams, large teams, even enterprises are hiring based on talent rather than location. So if you've got a graphics specialist who is in one continent and you've got someone else on another continent, that's okay. We can still help those folks work together. Oops, I skipped one. There we go. So I want to talk about the evolution of workflows once we put the cloud in the middle. So today, what you're seeing with this diagram is that post-production is pretty linear. So, you know, it's a pretty linear process between capturing the footage, ingesting it, logging it, and then figuring out how to get it to the creative team who's going to do the rough cut, do the craft edit, contribute video, sound, effects, do the color grading. Right. So all of these dotted lines kind of represent wait time. And this is how things happen today. It's really hard to shorten that wait time. And it's really hard to find more room for the creative process. What we think the cloud will enable tomorrow is the ability to make media available almost instantly so that things like logging and ingest can be automated right from the start. That's where artificial intelligence and machine learning can come in. As soon as your footage starts getting ingested into the cloud, we can start enriching it with metadata that's going to make it easy for you to work with. Your editor can start pulling together the rough cut, and your specialists can also share in that project, work together on the same timeline, and contribute their special pieces into the mix. So you'll see the difference here in this diagram is that that creative time has really expanded. So it used to be a little chunk in the middle. Now it's really elongated. So as the team iterates through the creative process in post-production, you can really gain time and come out with a better product. You're eliminating gaps. You're not waiting anymore. You're freeing up a lot of that time for the creative work. And ultimately, you can do more, better work because we can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you in the cloud. So imagine in a world not too far away where when you need to get started on a project, you can log into this self-organized media library that already contains everything that you need because we've automated ingest and we haven't made you lift a finger. You can see all of your assets already organized in the way that's most useful for you, and you won't have had to touch them yourself. So you can see here in this example, we've got media organized by scene. We've got it grouped by shot. So if it's a multicam scene, we've got all of the related camera footage grouped together. You can search based on keyword. So you can search on objects, you can search on faces and people, you could search on the type of shot or the subject matter within the shot. And you didn't have to have a person sit there and do all of that tagging and logging. All of that can be done in an automated way so that by the time you're ready to work, you have everything you need. While the team is working, again, they can take advantage of whatever device they may have available at the time. So I may be editing in Premiere Pro. My sound designer might be using Audition. When my sound designer needs review of some different musical options, someone could do that on their iPad. She could render out a version of the video with different musical clips. I could play through them, pick the one I want, select it and send it back and say, use this one. And it would get automatically picked up in the timeline. So we think there's a lot of really interesting options for that real-time human interaction, and that we can make that really easy and seamless. So we'll talk a little bit about the publishing workflow that I mentioned earlier. What's interesting here is as I mentioned, the volume and the variations of content that people need to publish nowadays has really kind of gone beyond human scale. And we could also envision a world right around the corner using technology that Adobe has today, like auto reframe, to make different versions of the same content. So you can see we've got different aspect ratios here. We've got a vertical video, we've got square, we've got 16:9. We may have different durations. So you might have a 15-second clip. You might have a 30-second clip. You might have the full length clip. All of these can be generated as automatic rough cuts. We can make them editable so you can fine tune them before you publish, Or we might get so good at understanding the type of content that you produce that we do all of this for you. It's automated and you know it's going to be good. So once we produce the versions that you want, you can double check the destinations that they're going to get published to. You can change those destinations if you want. So you'll see here, we've got social media channels. We've also got an AWS S3 bucket where you might want to archive the final version of this project. We've got variations that include different languages. So there's, again, that sort of exponential growth in the variety of the content that you can kind of push button publish. So in this world, once you publish, you could time it out, you could schedule it, you could tell it when you want to see your content on Vimeo versus the Sherwin-Williams, corporate website versus the asset management system that Sherwin-Williams uses to manage that information, and when you want to see it on YouTube. So you can publish anywhere there's a URL, anywhere that we have access to, we can publish. And all of that work has happened in real time. So we think that a lot of that human interaction can happen through collaboration on projects. We think that by eliminating a lot of the human toil, we can keep people in their creative zone. And we really have seen over the past 12 months, people moving more and more towards these workflows where they may not have been comfortable initially putting everything into the cloud, but as they got more used to it, they started seeing the upside, and work happens faster. It happens more smoothly with fewer hiccups. And it really doesn't matter where people are. So we think a lot of these changes are going to be durable. We're learning a ton from the customers that we talk to every day about how they're getting their work done. We have conversations with M&E customers who say that they almost don't even care about the tools in which they do the work. What they care about are things like content intelligence and services, right? So I'll pay you as much money as you want if you can provide transcripts on all my footage, if you can translate it into the 9 languages that I need to publish every single day, if you can tell me where I've used this basketball footage before, if you can tell me, do I have rights clearances on this already? So what we're seeing is really the emergence of services becoming a really critical part of these workflows that used to just be kind of tool-based and kind of based on the person, the machine they were sitting at, what they were capable of doing. We're seeing that really spread now into the cloud and across teams and also across services that can really provide a lot of value. So kind of ultimately what this all is driving towards is just doing more and being able to focus on creative work, not the drudgery and the toil of the setup and the organization and shuffling either people or machines or content around. We think we can eliminate a lot of that work and just let creative teams be creative. So that's it for my TED Talk. But I hope this has been enlightening for you. I hope that you have questions that you've been typing into the chat pod. We're happy to answer those. And happy to follow up with any of you on more detail in the future if you like. But we really see the cloud coming to the fore, and 2020 has proven that it is go time. And we're already seeing what we thought was going to be the future happening today.